and welcome to Smaulgld Silver Historical Series. Today we're going to talk about silver confiscation under Executive Order 6814, an executive order by Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued in 1934 that confiscated silver from U.S. citizens. Executive Order 6814 required the turning in of silver bullion to the United States government. Silver and U.S. foreign coins were exempt from the order. Nearly 123 million ounces of silver were turned into the U.S. Mint from 1934 to 1938. Why the U.S. Mint? Well, the United States needed silver to mint coins. Excuse me, how did this government know who had silver bullion? Well, we're going to find that out. We're going to go through why this executive order was required, why the U.S. Mint got the silver, and how they knew how people had silver. And we're going to go through the events going back to 1918, which created the need for this executive order. So this executive order is a real one. You may not have heard of it, but you can look it up. 6814, Executive Order 6814, dated August 9th, 1934. It's entitled the Executive Order 6814, requiring the delivery of all silver in the United States for coinage. In fact, there's a link here. I've already done you the trouble, saved you the trouble of going to Google or wherever you do your search from. You could just go to Smaulgld. I'll put a link below. You can click on the link and you can read about and the exact language of the statute. But I'm going to go through that language for you, excuse me, and explain to you what happened pursuant to Executive Order 6814. So I've put together some frequently asked questions about silver confiscation under the order. What silver had to be turned in? Well, silver situated in the United States. That basically means any silver in the United States was subject to this confiscation order. Silver of a fineness of 80% or more, and silver held in quantities over 500 troy ounces by any one person. So if you had a stack basically over the size of a monster box, you had to turn it in. Well, you had to turn in the amounts over that monster box. Keep in mind, though, back then people weren't stackers. If you wanted silver, it was in the coins. You just kept the coins. What silver was exempt? Well, U.S. silver coins, which at the time was U.S. dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars. They were 90% silver. And foreign silver coins. You didn't have to turn those in. If silver was kind of a lower fineness, 80% or less, then you didn't have to turn it in. Unprocessed silver, less than 80% fineness, that was mined in the United States after December 21st, 1933. So if you just gotten done processing it between, the 6-7 months before the order was out, you got to keep that. And if you had silver contained in articles fabricated and held in good faith for a specific and customary use, and not for the use as silver or for their value as silver bullion, well, that's presumably silver ornaments, jewelry, and silverware, I would guess. Although most people wouldn't have 500. You might have 500 ounces or more worth of silverware, I guess, if you had complete sets and you had big trays and ewers and pitchers and I don't know. But in any event, that silver did not have to be turned in. And if you had silver held for industrial, professional, artistic uses in amounts of less than 500 troy ounces, you didn't have to turn that in either. I guess that goes for artisans or people who are fabricating small industrial items. Now, there was no investment exemption, though. So if for whatever reason you were a stacker back then, and you had silver bars and you had more than 500 ounces of them, and they were, the 999 pure bars, you had to turn them in. How much did you get for your silver? Short answer is 50 cents. Now that was a little more than the going price at the time, which was about 45, 46 cents an ounce prior to the executive order. So basically, just again, it's an example where the government just sets the price. They tell you silver is now 50 cents an ounce, and you can't have it. You got to turn it into us. How much silver was confiscated? Nearly 113 million ounces. 112 112,937,925 ounces to be exact, were nationalized pursuant to Executive Order 606,814. Most of it was confiscated in the first year of the order that ran to 1938. In addition, consequent with the executive order, the U.S. Congress passed the Silver Purchase Act of 1934, and they purchased an additional 1.353 billion ounces of silver pursuant to that act. Much of it from domestic mining supplies, but they bought from overseas supplies as well. Let's see the chart here. How much additional silver the U.S. government added. So take the 1.353 billion ounces that they bought, throw in another 113 million, and you got close to 1.5 billion ounces of silver the United States government wanted to or managed to put into its coffers. Now, why did the United States need 1.5 billion ounces of silver? Well, what they needed it to make silver coins. But why were they in a position where they needed silver to make coins? Is that something the U.S. Mint does from just happens to have on hand? The U.S. had a very decent silver mining business. Why would they need in 1934 some silver to mint coins? Well, it all goes back to 1918, to the Pitman Act. The Pitman Act is named after a guy named K. Denson Pitman. He was a senator from Nevada. He's the modern day Harry Reid is his protege. No, is his forebearer. So this guy is a senator from Nevada, and he is a vigorous advocate for his state, which basically, if you know anything about the history of Nevada, had very big silver mines. And that's why the Nevada is still called the Silver State, because it mines silver. In fact, you have coins that used to be minted in Carson City with the double C, the silver dollars, because it was convenient to mint them right near the mines in Carson City, Nevada. In any event, in 1918, the United States Mint, United States, not the Mint, the United States melted down 270 million U.S. silver dollars, those Morgan silver dollars, and converted them into silver bullion and sold it to England. Now, why would they do that? Well, England, who controlled India at the time, had its own silver shortage, and there wasn't enough silver that England had to supply coinage for India. So they needed a massive amount of silver to produce Indian rupees. Now, they didn't do back then. They never considered, oh, we'll just make them out of tin. No, they need to make real money. Excuse me. So they needed the silver. And the United States was more than happy to provide that silver to them quick, fast, and in a hurry. And the way they did it was Senator Pittman's brainchild. He introduced the legislation that said, look, we got silver. Why don't we melt down these existing Morgan silver dollars? We got plenty of them. Melted down almost half of the ones they had minted to date. And then we will replace the silver. We got it here in Nevada, and we'll charge you maybe 30-40% higher than the market price to do so. But we'll do it. Don't you worry about it. We'll replace all those silver dollars with Nevada silver that you melt down. And that's exactly what happened. So they melted down 270 million U.S. silver dollars, shipped the silver out to England for a profit, and then Nevada cashed in and started mining the silver to replace the silver dollars that they had melted down. Well, the Silver Purchase Act was also sponsored by Senator Pittman. So this guy brought far more money back into Nevada probably than Harry Reid ever did. And so in 1921, the U.S. Mint recommenced minting silver dollars, which hadn't been excuse me, hadn't been minted since 1904. The last Morgan silver dollars was minted in 1904. They had been minting them since 1878. Large quantities of them. They melted down about half of them. So they started reproducing the silver dollars again in 1921 with the 1921 Morgan silver dollar. That is also the year they started making for the first time the peace dollars. Now, here are the Morgan dollars. You can take a look at them. If you're interested in buying them, I will put a link below, and also on the webpage you can see. The Morgan dollars feature Liberty head, and then also on the back the eagle, and then the peace dollars that were issued the same year for the first time. They are supposed to reflect the end of World War One. And again, you've got Liberty, and you've got on the back the peace symbol. It says peace right there. That's why they're called the peace dollars. Both of those coins they're not an ounce. They do not weigh an ounce each. They have in them about 0.77, maybe a little more than 3/4 of an ounce of silver. But they make for good collector's items, and if you're interested in buying them, I'll put a link for both Peace and Morgan silver dollars below. And on the blog post, you can also click on those links and you can buy them. And the reason I ask you if you're interested in buying them, Smaulgld does make a small commission. I have to make that disclosure. Not suggesting you buy them or you invest in them, but if you are going to buy them or invest them, you want one as a conversation piece, or you want to invest in more than one of them, please do so through the Smaulgld site. You can compare pricing and shipping, and that's how I pay to do these blog posts and podcasts. Okay, back to the Silver Confiscation Act. So the charts below that I'm going to show you shows that the silver that they used to mint coins after the Pitman Act, once they started getting more silver, almost all of it went into replacing the silver dollars that had been melted down, because they had a lot to make up. I mean, they melted down 270 million of these things. They're big. So from 1921 to, and this will explain something for you numismatics out there who collect mercury dimes, why there's so few of them in the 20s. From 1921 to 1923, they took 171 million ounces to produce U.S. coins, but 95% of that went into producing the silver dollars, the Morgans in 1921, and then from then on the peace dollars. And they produced a lot of the peace dollars and Morgan dollars during those years, but there wasn't enough silver left over to mint really enough quantities of dimes, quarters, and half dollars. 95% of it went to produce the silver dollars. So take a look at this chart here I put together. All right, so in 1921 they made 87 million Morgan and peace dollars. Okay, they used 67 million ounces. But look how few quarters they made. They made 1 million quarters that year. They made, 1.9 million quarters. They only made $1.5 million that year. All in all, they only made 12 million dimes. In 1922, they didn't make any half dollars, any quarters, any dimes, but they did make 66 million peace dollars that year. So you can see they were using the silver to replace the massive amounts of dollars they had melted. They just didn't have enough silver left over to make dimes, quarters, and half dollars. And then in 1923, a little better, they made 2 million instead of 1 million half dollars. Instead of making 1.9 million quarters, they did manage to make 11 million, and they made 56 million mercury dimes. But still, you have a period here of 3 years where basically they're not making much in the way of dimes, quarters, and half dollars. Now, to make matters worse, as you know, silver, these types of coins, they wear out faster than today's clad coins, and especially those standing Liberty quarters. The date wore right off of those things. In any event, so you're not getting many dimes, quarters, and half dollars made. You can see where the shortage is going to come from. Now, before the Pitman Act, and in a normal period of time, you could see when the population was much lower in the 1890s, it just took this 3-year period. They would make 7 million half dollars, 9 million quarters, 2 million dimes, 3 million dimes, 5 million quarters, 3 million. So they were always making a decent amount of dollars, but they made also 40, 50 years earlier, they were making more dimes, quarters, and half dollars than they were making in the 20s. You could see they used 18 million ounces of silver in those 3 years in the 1800s, and they used 163 million ounces of silver in the 3 years in the 20s just to make the silver dollar. So you went from making using 18 million ounces a year, or 18 million ounces every 3 years to make silver dollars, to using 163 million ounces in a 3-year period. And then again, but the amount used for the rest of it, they used 10 million ounces to make dimes, quarters, and half dollars in the 3-year period in the 1800s. And they used even less in the 20s when there was a greater need, when the population was greater. So it highlights that not many dimes, quarters, and half dollars are being made during the period post-Pitman Act, when all that new silver that was being mined from the Nevada mines was going to replacing, as it needed to, replacing the silver dollars. Well, the first ounces under Executive Order 6814 started flowing into the U.S. Treasury on August 14th, 5 days after signing the executive order, and with that silver acquired also from the Silver Purchase Act of 1934, the U.S. Mint began to ramp up silver coin production that had slowed down and even come to a standstill in the late 20s and early 30s. Only approximately 9% of the 63 million ounces of silver used to mint dimes, quarters, and half dollars and dollar coins from 1934 to 1936 went to mint silver dollars. So, and the reason for that was the Pitman Act required that the 270 million silver dollars that had been destroyed needed to be replaced. Well, by 1934, 1935, 1936, they were pretty much done with meeting that obligation. And then after that, they stopped making American silver dollars. They didn't make them ever again, other than for commemorative purposes in silver. They did make Eisenhower dollars, and they still make a clad dollar coin today, but they never made silver dollars again after 1934, though technically the American silver eagles that they sell to you are silver dollars. Quick point of trivia is in 1964 they were going to make a peace dollar, the same peace dollar that you see from 1921 to 1936. Apparently they minted them, but then they melted them down, so they don't exist. I don't even think there is one in existence as a rarity. In any event, they then began to really ramp up the production of quarters, dimes, and half dollars once they started getting the silver coming in from the confiscation and the Silver Purchase Act. And now you're seeing, look at that, 112 million mercury dimes made in 1936. When you go back to when they made none in 23, they're making 85 million mercury dimes in 1935. They made 50 million Washington quarters in 1936 compared to the 1.9 million that they made in 1922 and the 0 they made in 1923. So this is why they needed the silver. Now, this Confiscation Act, well, how did the government know who had the silver? It's interesting is that there was a researcher, his name is Charles Savoy, and apparently he noted a document that the U.S. kept that listed the quote hoarders of silver, and it was those individuals who held spot silver and futures contracts in amounts over $50,000. If you click on this link here, you can see they actually had a list of the people, their names of who had the right to buy to get this silver, and those people would have a hard time, I guess, back then taking delivery and getting away with it because they would immediately have to turn it in. But again, if they were buying silver for the profit and they had futures contracts, they probably were going to pay 45 cents on those contracts. So they turn it in for 50 cents. So they probably, and they didn't have to take delivery. So they probably weren't complaining too much about it. Now, did President Roosevelt sign other executive orders? It sounds like this guy is executive order crazy. He signed the executive order in 33 to confiscate gold. Then he signs the executive order in 34. Yeah, he did. He signed executive order, well, the 6102 everyone knows about, required the U.S. citizens to turn their gold. But he also signed executive orders 9066 and 9102 that authorized the removal and internment of Italian, German, and Japanese Americans. Now, a lot of people know about the Japanese internment. Germans were spared internment, but Italian Americans were not. So there were many Italians also that were interred under President Roosevelt's executive order. If you're interested in a book on it, it's called Una Storia Segreta, The Secret History of Italian American Evacuation and Internment During World War II. Now, the question is, how is Executive Order 6102 different than Executive 6814? The first one was for gold, the second one for silver. Well, they both effectively nationalized gold and silver by requiring the delivery of gold and silver to the government. The gold executive order, like the silver executive order, had an exemption for jewelry, but did not contain an exemption for coins. The gold executive order removed the monetary properties of gold from the citizens' hands, as the gold coins were required to be delivered to the government, and no further gold coins would be issued by the United States for general circulation. In contrast, the silver executive order specifically excluded silver coins like dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins made of silver that people may have had at the time. Why? Well, silver was needed to make more silver coins, so requiring them to turn in silver coins so they can recast them into new coins would have been counterproductive, perhaps, other than in some odd Keynesian way to get people to work to melt down the coins and then to recast them. But in any event, since it was to get more coins, it wasn't to demonetize silver, it was just to make more silver coins. They needed the silver. Now, the silver and gold deals were a little different. For you turned in your silver, as I mentioned earlier, you got 50 cents, which is a little more than 50 cents an ounce than the price. If you turned your gold in, which you had to do, you got $20.67 an ounce in 1933, which was the then market price. However, within 6 months, the U.S. government, under the Gold Act of 1934, revalued the price of gold at 35%. Which was a 40% devaluation of the dollar, and basically you lost 62% of the value of your gold had you been allowed to hold on to it, because you would have gotten the upside from $20.67 to $35. So the silver deal, the reason I guess you don't hear about it, it actually, and since there weren't really, other than hardcore investors buying futures contracts, they made money on the deal. People didn't really get inconvenienced at all. This actually helped people get silver, because the more silver the government had to make coins, the more coins that were in circulation. So it was a good thing. And if you were so inclined to save silver, now there were more coins available for you to save. There was one downside, but again, if they're going to give you a profit, if you made money on the 50 cents, that profit was taxed at 50%. But it was mandatory, so they gave you a mandatory profit, and then they said we're going to tax 50% of it. So again, this particular confiscation order is not, it wasn't as onerous at all. In fact, I can't see how you would be harmed by it, given that silver was in circulation, continued to be in circulation, and all they did was make more coins out of it. And if you wanted to make a profit, they gave you the profit. Even though they taxed you on it, you still got to keep half the profit. So it sounds overreaching and overbearing, but it's a lot different than just ending silver in circulation, is what they did with gold. When did it end? December 31st, 1937. Now, everyone's going to ask, what happened today? Did this set a precedent for the government to confiscate gold and silver again? Yes and no. Okay, both executive orders highlight one thing. An unchallenged president can nationalize any commodity, anything that exists within the borders of the United States and probably outside the borders if it wants to, and it gives a reason, just signs an executive order and says, turn it over. But I say no because the reasons for gold and silver confiscation in 1933 and 1934 don't exist today. Gold and silver were recognized by the United States government as money. They were functioning as such. Gold was taken to give the government control over the nation's wealth and remove it from the citizens' day-to-day transactions. Silver was taken in order to make coinage. Neither of these reasons exist today. The government doesn't recognize either gold or silver as money. The U.S. dollar has been backed by gold since 1971, and the U.S. no longer mints coins made out of silver for use in general circulation. So they don't need the gold to back the dollar, and they don't need the silver to mint coins. Now let's say, but wait a minute, what if the United States wanted to reback the dollar with gold? Well, supposedly and presumably, the U.S. has over 8,000 tons of gold at the vaults at Fort Knox, West Point, and the New York Fed. Much of it acquired during the 1933 confiscation. And if they didn't, well, they'd be foolish to try to then all of a sudden come up with 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 tons of gold if they didn't have the gold they say they already have. So they're not going to get those amounts of gold by trying to confiscate a few 100,000 ounces that might be in the hands of private citizens. There's just not enough gold there. So if it really needed gold, the U.S. could easily print dollars to buy gold on the open market without, trying to chase down individual citizens. They can go after ETFs. They can go after mines. Confiscating individual gold, there's just not that much individual gold that they can go after. Now, it's even more unlikely that the United States would wish to reissue silver coins. What are they going to do with that? That technology has led to the decline in cash and coin transactions, so that if the government wished to execute a heavy-handed order to confiscate silver, they almost certainly would not include in that order provision to remint silver coins, put them back into circulation so people can spend them as they please in an untraceable manner. That's never going to happen. The United States is never going to make silver coins again. Now, you could say maybe they need silver to back the dollar. That's possible, but then again, the same thing, the same avenues they can explore exist, where it's a lot easier for them to go after silver mines. They can go after stockpiles of COMEX, ETFs, rather than going around and trying to confiscate the small amounts of silver that might be in individual hands. Thanks again for listening. That is the story of the silver confiscation under Executive Order 6814. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to Smaulgld. And also, if you're interested in helping Smaulgld out, in addition to making your precious metals purchases through Smaulgld, you can also make a small donation to Smaulgld at the link below and then also on the website. Thank you very much.